Lesson 3. Just a few weeks ago, you thought, I can't read Hebrew, or I'm nervous about it.
Still am, but I
And
can read it.
you might still feel nervous, but even already, we're being able to read some Hebrew. The trick is that we may not understand what we're reading, but that is okay, because the name of this class is Time to Read Hebrew. It's not necessarily that we will understand everything that we read, but when we learn a new language, there's a couple of different ways that people approach learning a new language. One is all auditory. They read and write nothing. They just understand what's spoken to them. Come and eat. There is the bathroom. Where is the store? Do you sell milk? Those types of things, all auditory. That is a style of learning language. It is one that most people will learn through immersion language because they're a newborn baby and they learn spoken language long before they ever get to written language. But as adults, most of us will learn written language and then how to apply it to spoken language. So that's what we're doing in this Hebrew class. Our goal is to learn how to read it, because once we have the skill of reading it, we can look it up in a Hebrew English dictionary, or we can go online where it will give us the choice of a Hebrew alphabet, and we can type in the Hebrew letters, and it will tell us what it is in our language. So then we can take the Hebrew and translate it to Portuguese if we'd like to, or to English, or to French, or to Spanish, or whatever other language we already are comfortable with. And gradually we will learn more. At some point, if we go to live in a place where they only use that language, like if we make Aliyah to Israel, then we'll be in immersion language all over again, but we'll at least have some kind of an idea. In the meantime, I like to give you an opportunity to begin to hear those sounds and to rationalize in your own mind what might be the vowel that is giving me direction on how to say that. What might that word be? Can I relate to that word? Is there a way for me to connect to that word in such a way that I begin to remember it and even to think of it as a Hebrew word and to use it as a Hebrew word and forget that it's also a word in English? And there came a time when I was doing something, I forget exactly what it was, but I was saying a prayer from the Siddur. There's a Messianic Siddur, and I was saying this prayer, or reading this prayer, and when I got done reading it, I had understood what I said in Hebrew so much I forgot to translate it for everyone. And I was so excited for myself that I actually understood what I had said. I knew what I said, and I didn't have to translate it. So that was a really neat experience. It doesn't happen very often. But in the early words, I can do that a little bit. So if I ever don't tell you what a word means, make me stop and tell you, because I just forgot to tell you that. Okay, so let's look at some of the things we've done in preparation before we go on to lesson 3. Let's review a few things we've done in lesson 2. In lesson 2, we learned this letter. Do you remember the name of this letter?
Dalet.
Dalet, yes, okay. And using our key, our technique, we always know that the first sound of the written letter, Dalet, the written name of the letter, is the sound that that letter makes. So this letter is going to make a sound of D. And if we remember from lesson 1, we're moving in this direction. Okay. So we have a D, and we have what letter?
That's Gimel.
Gimel, yes. And Gimel, following our rules, would then say what sound?
G.
G. So we have a D and a G. So I think when we spell it, I have to look back here, make sure, because I got to look back in lesson 2. When we spell that word, we want it to say, do you remember this word? Mm-hmm. Okay, what is it?
Dog.
Dog.
Means fish.
Yeah. A dog is not a dog, it's a fish. Kind of a joke. But if we're going to make this be dog, we only know 2 vowels at this point. We know one that looks like this. Remember its name? Kamatz, yeah. And we know this one. Patak, yeah. You don't know this one yet. That's for this. That's for tonight.
Got it this week.
We're getting it this week. So don't worry about it yet. So we have kamatz and patak. If we want this to say dog, what vowel might go underneath of there?
I think it's a patak.
Well, it's either one or the other since we only have that sound. Oops, my pen isn't being very cooperative tonight. And it's a kamatz.
Yep.
Now, there's no way for you to tell with your ear or my ear whether it's a kamatz or a patak, okay? They both say ah. It's a spelling issue. So I have no problem saying, which one is it? Which one is it? Somebody call that out to me. Somebody tell me how to spell this, okay? And we might do that in English sometimes if we say, how do you spell something? You know, we just don't know whether it's an A or an I or an AI or, boy, that is just really not writing. Well, I'm going to erase it and start over and see if I can get a black line to come out of this pen. That's the best I'm going to get out of this pen. That's surprising. Okay, so if I had written this with a patak, you would still pronounce it correctly, but it would be misspelled. That's the joy of not using vowels when we write in Hebrew in Israel. Here in this class, I will always give you the vowels because they tell us things. And I will give you the names of the vowels, which your book doesn't give you. Because I think as adults, it's helpful. I know it's helpful to me to be able to know which vowel we're talking about by it having a name and not calling it that little T thingamajiggy or that flat one or that dot. Because later on we're going to have more with all kinds of other symbols, mostly dots. And it's very hard to explain what all those dots are doing, but we give it a name and it's helpful, okay? So this one then becomes dog. How about this next one? You remember what these letters are?
Yeah, that's a bait.
Bait, yes. So that has a b sound, and this is a
That is a tav.
tav, and so it has a
Ta.
t sound like the letter T, right? Okay, so here we have ba, t, ba, t. And what might the vowel under there be?
Straight memorization.
Oh, yes. Me too. And usually looking it up.
I get it wrong every time.
But that's where I'm not worried about it because right now I just want you to hear the vowel sound. And I'm not even seeing it in my book.
This shows it a patak.
A patak, okay.
Daughter.
Yep, daughter, okay. This one was our very first key word.
That's a shin.
A shin, which gives an SH sound.
And that's a bait.
Bait with a b sound and a
And a tav.
tav with a t sound. So we have Shabbat, Shabbat.
If you put the vowels in.
Well, it's Shabbat whether you put the vowels or not. Okay? But to help us, we're going to put our vowels. Okay? So call out those vowels for me. It's our first key word. So turn back to lesson 1 and look at the top of the page.
I think the bait has a kamatz under it.
You think it has a kamatz? Look in your book and see, make sure.
Yeah, it does.
And what does the shin have under it?
It has a patak.
It has a patak. Okay. Most of the time, the last letter of a word will not have a vowel under it. That's not all the time, but most of the time. Okay? All right. How about this one? Do you remember this letter?
Yeah, that's a dalet.
A dalet, so it has a duh sound, and this is a
Tav.
tav, and so it has a t sound. So we have a da, t. Do you remember that key word?
Religion.
Religion, yeah. Does it have any vowels? Don't try to memorize it, just look it up.
Okay.
Because that's what almost everybody does at this point.
There's a komatz.
A kamatz. People in the back of the room have a very hard time seeing this. That's why I'm irritated with my pen. Let me get a different colored pen that hasn't been used as much. And it's a kamatz. So when I drew it up here on the board, I put a long line because the people at the back of the room have a very hard time seeing it. But when you write it, I don't want you to write it that way. I want you to write it with just the littlest, tiniest dingle-dangle hanging down. Because I don't want you to say it has a T under it. It doesn't have a T, it has a kamatz. Okay? And there is a big difference because T is in English and kamatz is in Hebrew. That's a big difference. Okay? So we want to try to use, where we can, the correct names of the vowels and to use them correctly. And it's tricky because the further along we go in the lesson, the more of them there are. But that's okay, because if you make a mistake, we just fix it. It's okay. Nobody is expected to be perfect, particularly as an adult trying to learn another language.
The only thing I know to do is just memorize those.
Well, and if you're a good memorizer, that's fantastic. But the other thing that I like to do is say, make yourself some flashcards or a strip of paper with things on it where you like to work on your language and go back to your reference chart as often as you need to. Use it, use it, use it, use it, use it. Because if there's no guilt, no sin, no negative connotation to looking back to see what it is, as soon as you're able, as soon as you're able, you'll stop looking back. If there's a guilty feeling with, oh, I failed again, I have to look back, that gives a negative feeling to using a resource. I never want anybody to feel bad about using a resource. Make yourself flashcards, make yourself charts, utilize anything you need to. Get somebody to quiz you. Frequently, quiz yourself. Make a mistake, go, oh, poo, and go on and do it again. You know, there's no shame in learning. And so often we've been exposed to shame attached to learning. And it's a very nasty way to try to teach anyone. Far better to say, that was great, you did it well, or not quite, try again, because it doesn't, there's also no big $1 million reward if you learn it all this week. I don't have it, they're not going to give it to you, you know? So you learn a little, you build a little, you learn a little more. Okay, so tonight I want to see, did I tell you this trick? Did I talk to you about hanging letters from the upper line?
You did.
Good, okay, because sometimes I don't talk about that till lesson 3. But just to reinforce to those of you watching on YouTube, when we write in Hebrew on a lined piece of paper, it is very helpful to hang your letters, pardon me, from the line. So if I was going to write dog, which is not a fish, a dog is not a dog in Hebrew, a dog is a fish. If we're going to write it in Hebrew, then I'm going to write it up here on this upper line, and then the gimel. And I can attach it right to the line if I want to. It's neither here nor there. I just wanted you to be able to see the top of the letters. But that leaves me space to put a vowel underneath. Otherwise, I can lose that vowel into the lower line, particularly if it's a patak or a vowel that's just a dot. I can lose that right into this bottom line. Whether I lose it into the line or whether the next letters that are hanging below it might come up above the line. There's a few letters that come above the line, a few letters that go below the line. Most do not. But I want to leave most of my letter and my vowel inside between the two lines. So it's easier to hang your letters from the top line, where in English, if I was going to write dog, I would teach a child to put their letters down on the line. So I don't want to put them down on the line. I want to hang them from the line, okay? So I want to make sure I had reinforced that. And we've reviewed some words that we've already learned, which is amazing. We're already reading in words in Hebrew. So now in lesson 3, we're going to learn some new letters. The first letter is not a new letter to us. Do you remember its name?
Shin.
Shin, yes. And I like to tell people when I'm teaching an adult class, there is another letter that looks very much like Shin. The reason I like to mention something to you about it is because you are adults. In children's classes, we don't even mention that there's another letter that looks like it because the people that write the book think that's going to confuse the children terribly. I think it's more helpful to know there's going to come another letter that looks like this, but it's going to be a little bit different. So that when I do introduce that letter up in lesson 11, you'll go, oh yes, I sort of remember that. I remember you said there would be something different. So for right now, I want you to notice where I put this diacritical mark right here, okay? And make sure that when you write a shin, that you get its dot over top of this line. You don't want it to accidentally be over here or accidentally be over there, okay? All right. Now, this is a new letter, and I have it drawn out just by itself down here. This letter's name is Mem. And using our technique of the first sound or the first letter in the word, what's the sound of this letter going to be? We don't want to say M because that sort of has an AH sound to it. So it's just okay? When I draw a mem, this is how I draw it. But I would be every bit as correct if I drew it like this. It's just a handwriting style. Probably because I speak English and I write in English mostly, I tend to start from the wrong side. Okay? In your book, it'll give you an opportunity, and I'm not even sure how they have you start. But probably the best, most correct way is to start and go this way, and then up and over. But a key point is there's a space right in there that has nothing in it. One way to remember that is to say, if I took this line, that space, if I took that bit of line that would have been in there, and I stuck it up here instead, then I have a mem. So in essence, I erase a little bit of this line, or I never draw it, and I stick it up on top. And I have a mem.
It also looks like an open stirrup with an ear.
Good. Some people will say that it looks like a mountain. Some people will say that it looks like a muffin. A stirrup for the horsewoman, absolutely, okay? It does not matter, whatever way helps you to remember. If there's something about a stirrup that can associate the sound of getting up on my horse, you know, that is absolutely fine. I would encourage you to associate it with something that gives that sound, but it absolutely doesn't matter. If you look at it and go, oh, that's a stirrup, it says that is fine, okay, because it's just learning the sound of the letter, okay? So now, if I take this mem and I put a kamatz underneath of it, what do I have?
You have an AH sound.
So ma, yeah. What if I put a patak underneath of it?
Same.
So what sound would ma? Okay. So we're going to learn another vowel in just a moment. Okay. But before we do that, I'm going to take these mems off because we're going to learn an unusual letter also tonight. And this unusual letter is called an aleph. Starts with the letter A when you write it in English. but you draw it, it looks a little bit like the letter N, but it's not a letter N. It has a diagonal line. And then, like the letter X has a diagonal line this way, not really. It has a line that comes down looking like it might be going to do that. And then this one starts up here. And you'll see lots and lots of people's variations of that. Even like this, I got it kind of long on the... So most people will say that looks like the letter N in English. Okay. But one reason not to call it an N is that it has no sound in and of itself. So we don't want to confuse it with a letter that has a sound. Okay? The best way to think about an aleph is it's a space holder. In English, when we write the word cake, we do not say kake. Kake would be using each letter that's there. Instead, in English, this letter is silent and it tells us to do something with a letter that occurs previously. It says go back and make this be a long A. And then we have cake and we're all happy. In Hebrew, we have the occasion to have a letter to hold a space because we need a vowel. We need to have a vowel sound, but we can't have a vowel sound without a letter to hold a space for it. So in other words, we couldn't write a word like this. Because there's no thing, no consonant, no letter out here. We're not allowed to write that.
Is it the only silent space holder?
Well, there are only two, and for a long time, aleph is going to be the only one you have to encounter. Okay. You won't learn the other one until about lesson 9 or 10, okay? So, to have this vowel there, and I just made up these letters that didn't, that's not something to be necessarily a word, okay? But you have to have a space holder there. So I like to sometimes I'll call it the something box. What's inside the something box? Could put any letter there. But if we don't want a sound of a letter, then we put aleph. Because aleph has no sound in and of itself. Okay?
But if you were to pronounce that, wouldn't you still say ah?
Yes, exactly. Because the aleph has no sound does not mean that the vowel has no sound. So this becomes ah, as opposed to this being ba. This one is just ah. This one is ba, or whatever other letter we have there. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're just pronouncing the vowel.
Correct.
With the aleph.
Correct. So again, it becomes a spelling issue, okay? Of something is spelled with an aleph, but we don't have to pronounce it. But it's there because we need the vowel. And that does get very tricky when we stop writing vowels. But in this class, we will never stop writing vowels. I will always give you vowels, I think. Okay, so here we have some a new word. Okay, we have a shin, and we have a mem, and we have a shin. Okay, so let's see if we can pronounce it. Let me see in our book. Let me see what vowels are supposed to be in there. Okay, an aleph. Oh yes. Okay. I'm not sure. It's a key. It's a cool Hebrew word or something at the bottom of one of the pages. Look in lesson 3.
That's Shamash.
Yes.
Handle.
Sort of.
That's what it is.
Okay. Is it kamatzes? Are they both kamatzes? It's a cool Hebrew word at the bottom.
The first shin is a patak.
Is a patak. Okay. And then a kamatz.
Yes.
Okay, so what we have is Shamash. And it does mean candle, and it does mean holder, but where I like to bring out another meaning to it is Shamash means the servant candle, a servant. So Yeshua came as a servant, and so he became our Shamash. He created in and of himself a position of being a helper. The Holy Spirit is a Shamash concept, okay? So the place that we most often see this word in our Messianic community is at Hanukkah. And in Hanukkah, we have a Hanukkah, which holds 9 candles, and always one candle is set off to the side. Either it's a little bit higher than the other candles, or a little bit lower, or it's a little to the right, or it's a little to the left. It doesn't really matter where it is, so long as it's one of the 9 candles, and it's obviously a little bit different. And that's the candle that you light first, and you use it to light all the other candles. Rabbinical tradition, kind of fun. Okay, but that's a place where we are familiar with the word, the Shamash candle. Okay, so Shamash. This word is, and I think this is in our book. Okay, it's our keyboard. So tell me the vowels under it. Under this first aleph, we have.
Well, let's see. Nothing.
Nothing under this one?
Oh, wait, there is something.
I bet there is something, because otherwise we wouldn't even need that.
It's a patak.
It's a patak. Okay, and under this one?
A
Kamatz. Okay. Okay. So this one says no sound at all, so we just have the ah, ba, and this is the last letter. We need a last letter after the vowel, so we don't want a sound, so we just have Abba. An Abba. Are you familiar with that word Abba? And what does Abba mean? Abba means father. Kind of a familiar father, so you could say it means father. You could also very easily see it as dad, or the very familiar daddy. Many people will say Abba father. They're really saying daddy father or father father. It's a familiarity. So Abba father really isn't correct, but that's okay. All right. But this says Abba. And most children in Israel call their dad Abba. It's as common as Dad, look at here, Dad. They say Abba, 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 Abba. When I was in Israel in September, we were walking along the Yarden River, and we were making our way up to the headwaters, and we came across an Orthodox family, and they had about 5 children, 4 boys and a little girl, and they were in swimsuits playing in the water. And we knew they were an Orthodox family because the boys all had curls. Otherwise, they looked like ordinary American children. But Abba, 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 look at me, look at me, look at me, just like children in America would be calling out, Mom, Dad, look, I can make a big splash. It's exactly what they were doing. So, very familiar word and very frequently heard because everybody hears Dad and Daddy all the time, okay? So now we have another word. And let's write down the vowels underneath of it. We have an aleph with a, and it's on your page also.
E, what's it called?
So it has a dot, okay?
But what is the
It has a dot. I'm going to tell you, okay? How about under the mem?
Let's see, there's a kamatz.
A kamatz, okay? And is there anything underneath of this final one? No. Okay. All right. So we know that this is going to have an E sound because we've been told that this word is ima. And if this word is dad, we might assume this word is mom. Okay. All right. So the name of this vowel is a herik. Whoops. I didn't write that very neatly. A herik. You can spell it any way you want to, okay? Because it is spelled all kinds of different ways. Just like kamatz is spelled with a K, kamatz is spelled with a Q. If you get the concept that it's a herik, you can spell it almost any way you want to in English, okay? I've seen it spelled like that. I've seen it, and it doesn't, you don't even see the R in there. I mean, it's just crazy. So this is the way I spell herik, okay? And you can spell it different ways because, again, it doesn't matter. It only matters for your reference what you're going to remember to call it, okay? And a herik makes an E sound. Now, when we get to another step, we're going to find that there's another something that goes with the herik sometimes, and it creates almost a double E sound. So for right now, I don't want you to make a strong double E sound, or you won't have anything to go to when we move up to the next developmental level of a herik, okay? So we want it to have an E sound. We do not want it to have an eh sound like a short egg. We want it to have the E sound of the long E in English, but not an extended pronounced E. So if I was going to say this, I wouldn't say ima. I just say ima. So yes, it's a long sound, but yes, it's a short sound also. Ima. Okay? Make sense? Mm-hmm. All right. So I think those are all of our concepts that we're supposed to master tonight, and we're going to do some practice reading. So I'm going to turn off the machine, and we'll move on to practice reading on your pages. Let me get my hand to go with me. My numbers are very number 14 and 15. And then also when you do your workbook pages, do make it a point to do the workbook pages. They're pretty important to get the concept to go into your mind. So take your time, read the directions, and do the workbook pages. You'll find that your next lesson goes easier each time.